Hey there. In this video, we're going to talk about how you can measure the incrementality of your YouTube campaigns. So YouTube, as we all know, is more of an upper funnel sort of a channel. Typically, that's how it has been seen, that it is a channel where you will run some sort of awareness ads, awareness video ads, and that is going to help you downstream, lower down the funnel in your other types of channels, be it Google or even Meta. But it has been increasingly seen that YouTube has a hybrid character. It can act as both as a top of the funnel as well as bottom of the funnel channel, and the campaigns, of course, that have evolved over time. Demand Gen is a more recent campaign, and this can serve both purposes. So what we're going to see here is typically going to be a case of incrementality testing for YouTube as a channel, as a medium, to see how much incremental it has really been. So I'm going to show you a case study. So this particular screenshot that you see is, or rather this graph, is from a recent incrementality test that I'd run on YouTube for a particular brand, and you'll see that it has two dotted lines. And so first of all, it's called causal revenue lift, and these two dotted lines, gray dotted lines, they represent two different events. So essentially, incrementality testing is all about a specific event, and you see before and after that event how things changed and whether or not you got any lift. So that first gray dotted line, that represents the YouTube campaign launch. The second dotted line, that represents when the campaign actually ended. So that's also a very important event, but in this case, this actually does not mark the end of our analysis, because the study also continues after that, and that's because there is something called a PTW, or a post-test window effect, and that actually constituted, in this case, 30% of the total lift that was generated from YouTube. So just to now flesh it out a little bit, this test was for a period of 28 weeks, so that's a pretty long period. That was broken down into three periods. The first one was a simple pre-period, when the test wasn't really going on. In that sense, there was just a pre-period with which the comparison was being done, and so that was a period of 8 weeks, or say a couple of months. Then there's also a campaign period, which is the core period when the YouTube campaigns were actually live. This was a 12-week period, and then followed by a PTW, post-test window, of another 8 weeks. Just to give an idea of why the PTW has been added here, typically what happens in these channels, which has a upper funnel kind of an effect, is that it takes time to actually show effects, especially on downstream or bottom line metrics, say core KPIs, revenue or sales. So it takes time for that to generate, and it often happens through halo effect through other types of campaigns. So we're obviously not going to look at the halo effect of one channel on another, or one campaign type or on another. Instead, we're going to look at the ultimate impact, on the aggregate impact, on the baseline metrics, on the store level metrics. So in this case, which is revenue. So we're going to look at causal revenue lift, and that deep blue line that you see here, that actually represents the actual observed revenue. And there is also an orange line that starts some right after the first dotted line, which is where the campaign started, the counterfactual, that goes on to show you that if YouTube campaign had never been launched, then what the revenue over time would have really looked like. So essentially, in the x-axis, what you simply have is the weeks, and you obviously have the total revenue in the y-axis. So the total impact, the total incremental lift, was over $650,000 in this case over a span of 28 weeks. That was from YouTube in the given campaign period, but we saw that, like I said, 30% of the lift actually came during the post-test period. So in this case, the required ROAS was 5x, and the campaign managed to get somewhere like 3.8x or thereabout, if we only consider the revenue from the campaign period. So the interesting thing really happened that once the campaign was stopped, but we continued to see that there was an effect of that campaign. So obviously the platform would not be reporting this, right? So this was entirely understood purely through the incrementality test that's really done. So the method that we followed here, the methodology that was followed, was a quasi-experimental method for establishing the causal lift or the causal impact of YouTube campaigns, and that was essentially difference in differences. And the two most important assumptions of difference in differences, and it has to be understood that assumptions are the absolute fundamentals. You cannot consider them as secondary or just as mere accessories when it comes to causal methods or incrementality testing. You have to have very sound assumptions, and those assumptions must be based on realistic assumptions, and you must be able to validate them. So in this case, most important any difference in difference is always the parallel trends assumption and the sattva assumption. The latter one meaning that there is no spillover between the control and test. And the difference between these two, that gives you the peak causal, that gives you the causal lift, and then towards the end obviously we have a peak causal lift as well. And after that we also had a carryover effect which first peaked and then gradually decays. So this is what has been described here in this chart. And let's actually try to understand it a little bit better. So just to explain this concept even further, let me just dive into this little notebook here. I like doing this to explain concepts. So what we're talking about is basically, pardon my drawing skills, which aren't really great. I know Picasso, but let's actually consider two periods. The first one would be your pre-period, and the second one would be your post-period. And let's actually divide these two by this dotted line. So in this case, what we are measuring is the revenue here in the y-axis, and the x-axis is simply your time, how it has evolved over time. So the pre-period will have, suppose, the initial 8 weeks, and the post period will actually have, remember what we said, that it's going to have like 12 weeks plus 8 weeks. So that's a total of 20 weeks actually, because you have the campaign launch and then you also have a PTW period. So we need to combine both of these together to have 20 weeks. So now we're going to consider two different sets of regions where the test was being implemented and where it was not. So the first one where it was implemented would be the test regions or the test geos. So let's actually give it by this red line here, right? And let's actually give by a black line the control. So what the parallel trends assumption says is that they will actually have a very similar sort of trajectory in the pre-period, and that's that's what you see here, that they're following a similar sort of trajectory, and by that means that they're parallel, right? Their levels may be different, as in this case you'll see that this is basically your test, which is given by the red one, and the black one is your control. So the control geo simply means, or geos rather, simply means that this is where you did not run that test, right? You did not launch the YouTube campaign. So they were not exposed to the YouTube campaigns. And for them, let's say the counterfactual is that, it kind of is something like this. Whereas for the test region, it could be something like this, where it actually goes above and maintains a certain trajectory. So this difference that would exist, that I can mark by this thing here, that's your total lift. Basically, that's your total incremental lift. This is basically what incrementality is all about. The difference between the what's called the counterfactual. So this dashed line here in black, that is your counterfactual. So this black dotted line, that is your counterfactual. So why it's called counterfactual? Because we cannot see it, right? We cannot have the cake and eat it at the same time, or we cannot eat the cake and have it at the same time. So because we launched a test, we'll never, of course, know what would have been the case if the test wasn't going to be launched, right? And the counterfactual simply means that the control and the test, this is basically what satisfies the parallel trends assumption, right? Let's use green here. So this thing here, the fact that these two are parallel or following a similar trajectory, this satisfies what's called the parallel trends assumption, right? And because this has been satisfied, you can now consider that the test would have followed the similar trajectory like the control in the pre-period, because they were parallel and they had similar, and there are obviously methods. I'm not going into the technical methods, But since the methodology is there and it has established that they satisfy the parallel prince assumption, it satisfied the Sattva assumption, which means that there was no spillover effect. It means that you can consider that the test would have followed this sort of a trajectory, which is given by which is given in the post region, in the post period, and therefore the gap between what would have happened, which is given by the dotted line without the YouTube campaigns, and what has happened after YouTube has been launched, which is given by the bold red line. The difference between these two gives us incremental lift. It's a very simple concept, as you can see. Intuitively speaking, it couldn't be any easier. But where you're going to face some resistance is really, when people ask you, why do you consider these regions in the pre-period to be parallel? Why do you consider that the parallel prince assumption has been satisfied? These are valid questions. These are not bad questions, and you need to be able to equip with the knowledge of the method that we're talking about, which is difference in differences. So this is the name of the method here. Diff, very popular method in econometrics, very popular method in economics, or basically causal science, or the science of causality, causal inference. So you would, of course, require that understanding why you would call that a parallel trend assumption, but you hope you can understand that, like, these two don't necessarily, of course, have to be like this. Like, if I maybe choose another color here, and they don't have to be like, let's let us just add a page. They don't have to follow this sort of a trajectory. Like, they don't have to be the exact same level, right? Or let's say that this was control, and let's say this was test. Like, they don't have to overlap like that. That's not the point. So this is of course, this is also following a parallel trends assumption, but this is also the case where the levels are the same, but you don't need that. That's not a requirement. The requirement is that they're parallel. So instead of this, you would need it to be something like this, right? That's what you would need it to be. Now, a very important point here, if you look at what I did earlier, is that the test was below the control, right? So the geos that received the YouTube campaign, that were exposed to the YouTube campaign, they were actually at a lesser level, and then the levels increased after the intervention. This is a very interesting thing. I mean, if it were the other way around, suppose in this example what I just started, suppose the test, the green one, is your test, and the black one is your control, and if in the post period, so this is your pre, this is your post, and if in the post period, if the control, of course, if it might continue on a trajectory like this, say, and the test continues, of course, on an increased trajectory, say a much more increased trajectory because of the YouTube campaigns. In fact, let's not do it dotted, let's do a solid one, because that's our convention. Like, dotted lines are usually for the counterfactuals only. So now in this case, of course, what will happen is this will be your lift, and of course you will have a peak lift here, which you can call peak lift, which is the maximum amount of lift that you have. But the point here is that there is a valid question that can be asked here, like, the test was already above the control by a fair margin. So what is now, like, this is a valid question. Like, it becomes even more, the onus becomes even more on you to show that the lift in the post period, the additional lift that actually came, that was truly because of the YouTube campaign. Like, was the lift more than the difference in levels that existed earlier? So these sort of questions might arise, and of course you would have to answer this question.